Welcome everyone. Welcome to Money Magnet JB. I'm your host, T Brandy J. And today this episode is going to be all about Tea Brandy. Who is Tea Brandy? And I'm here to give you a little bit of background about Tea Brandy, your host. First and foremost, I want to recognize my hometown. I'm from a small town in Mississippi, Greenville, Mississippi, Washington County, which is on the border of Arkansas and Mississippi. That's where I grew up. That's where I went to high school and did a whole bunch of stuff. So I came out of high school at T.L. Weston High School in Greenville, Mississippi. Yay. And I was very troubled adolescent. I had a very hard childhood. I went through a lot, and I just want to touch on a few things that I went through so that you guys can get to know me. And I want to be a little bit transparent about who Tea Brandy is. First and foremost, I was a juvenile delinquent. And for those who know what that is, I was in and out of juvie hall. I was in a lot of trouble. I was always suspended, expelled from school. I did a lot of things. I had a lot of anger built up inside because of some of the things I went through as a child. I have several sisters and brothers. I have a few of them who I am very close to. But to delve a little deeper about who I am, my mother was a single mother until I was 10 years old. And at that time, she married my stepfather, who molested and raped me. And that went on from the time I was 10 years old to the time I was 14 years old. Needless to say, I was dealing with a lot of abandonment issues, and I was dealing with trying to survive in a house with a stepfather who was molesting me. So I did a lot of acting out in school. I did a lot of fighting. I was very angry. I had a lot of wrath built inside because I didn't know how to cope with being molested. I didn't know how to cope with being abused and didn't know how to reach out to anybody in my family to let them know what I was going through. And when I decided to let somebody know, like my mom, it literally backfired on me. To this day, I have never taken or had an alcoholic beverage in my life because of the excuses that my mother gave for the reason why my stepfather was molesting me. I remember at 10 years old telling my mother, hey, when you left home, he did X, Y, Z to me. And her excuse was, oh, he only did it because he was drunk. And in my mind at 10 years old, I was thinking, okay, if drinking makes you do this, this is something that I never want to do in my life. So that's one of the reasons I never, had alcohol. I contributed to what he did to me. So throughout school, I was very intelligent. I was very smart. And I had some amazing teachers that instilled that in me, all the way from elementary to junior high to high school. I had these amazing teachers that recognized that I was brilliant. They recognized that I was smart. And so they tried to instill those things in me, hey, you're smart, you're beautiful. But at that time, I didn't feel smart and I didn't feel beautiful because of what I was going through at home. And needless to say, my relationship with my mother was non-existent because I felt like she didn't protect me from her husband. There was a time she actually caught him in the act. And instead of defending me, she belittled me and said it was my fault because I was taking a bath during the day. That's why he was doing what he was doing. So I hated my mother because of this stuff. And because I hated her, I hated the world. So I went out, I went to school, I went to, fighting, and I was, built up so much anger and rage that's all I knew was to lash out. And so I started to confide in some teachers. Back then, I had a very special teacher, Mr. Larry Byers, senior of Greenville, Mississippi. He used to instill a lot of things in me, but at that time, I didn't understand, what he was trying to do. I just thought he was being hard on me. Like, why is this hard on me? And I'm always lashing back at him. But he stayed consistent in the things that he would try to teach me and, motivate me to be better than I was, or better than I even thought I was, because I felt like I was a nobody. I didn't feel worthy because of what was going on in my home. So I love, Mr. Larry Byers Sr. I loved him all the way until he passed away, because I remember the things he used to tell me back then when I was just in elementary school. I had several teachers that, would try to mentor me because they knew that I was brilliant. They knew that I was smart. I didn't care about any of that. And so when I finally decided to reach out to other people to get help, I was screaming for help. Like, this is going on in my home. Like, can somebody help me? I would stay out all night in parks, stay out all night with friends at 11, 12 years old, just so I wouldn't go home. And I was screaming out for help, somebody please help me. And when my mother realized that I was doing this, she had me placed in a psychiatric hospital to silence me. So I was silent about the rape, the abuse, because she was institutionalizing me, because she didn't want me to tell. And I would get into these hospitals and I would tell them, hey, this is what's going on. And they was like, okay, well, you're a survivor. You've overcome this. But then I would go back home and then it would start all over. And then I'm back, in the presence of the courts, and I'm back in the institution, trying to get help. And she told me, hey, if you tell anybody else, that this is going on, I'm gonna leave you in that institution. I'm 12 years old at this time. And I'm thinking, okay, my God, I'm gonna be in this place for the rest of my life if I continue to tell people what's going on. So I made up this story that I lied about the whole thing just so I can get out. But there was a judge at that time, Judge Watson, for the Washington County Juvenile, Washington County in Greenville, Mississippi, knew that I was not lying. He's like, I don't believe you're lying. I believe that it actually happened. And I wanted to scream out to this man, yes, it actually happened. But this woman who gave birth to me, was putting this pressure that I wasn't gonna ever come home if I didn't say that it was a lie. So I went home and I began to live with my sister, because I didn't want to live there anymore, because I knew what was gonna happen if I continued to stay there. This episode is brought to you by JB Networking Systems, LLC. For all your business and financial needs, you can reach them on their website at jbnetworkingsystems.com or IG at JB Networking Systems. So that went on, all the way up until I was 14 and pregnant. That's when the molestation stopped. And it only stopped because he assumed that people were going to think it was his child. So that's when the molestation stopped in the house. But by that time, I was vicious. I was this mad person. I was on probation at the age of 12 in Washington County. I was not released off of probation until I was 18 years old. No matter what I did it because I knew that I was gonna always be in the system, so I didn't care. Like, I had no chill. I literally did what I wanted to do. I mean, I hurt people. I did a lot of things to hurt people because I was so hurt and I had no one to help me. And the police department, needless to say, in Greenville, Mississippi, wasn't all that great. So though myself and my older brother went to the police department to report this, nothing ever came of it. And so we just kind of let it die away, And I was still, in and out of juvie hall, in and out of training school or reform school, what they called it back then, because I was doing things. I was staying out, I was fighting, I was clubbing at 12 years old. I was, exotic dancer at 13, pregnant at 14, gave birth at 15. And then at the same time, I'm still trying to go to school because I had teachers like, girl, you're brilliant, you're smart, you need to, use that for your advantage, to your advantage. And I wasn't trying to hear all of that. I didn't realize how smart I was until I got into this huge fight at school, and they suspended me for 5 days. And when I came back to school, we had this big exam that we had to take. And I hadn't been there for 5 days. And so I remember taking the exam, and I was only one in the class that passed the exam. And the teacher pulled me aside and it's like, you've been gone for 5 days and you came back to school, you aced this test, but the people that have been here all week failed the test. And then at that point, I began to realize, okay, well, maybe I am as smart as my teacher has been telling me all these years. And by that time I was in high school. Let me see if I can use, the brains, that God has given me to do something better with myself. But still, I was still hurting. I was still hurting because I didn't have a mother. By the time I was 13, my biological father, Reverend Jimmy Kilpatrick, had passed away. And I had no relationship with my mother. I hated my mother. So I still had all this hurt built inside. So I still didn't know how to cope with it, so I was still trying to cope with it. And in the meantime, I had to, racked up a string of offenses, criminal offenses on my record as a juvenile. And so I didn't know how I was going to change my life. All I knew is that I wanted to be better than who I was. I wanted to change, but how was I going to change, within a dysfunctional family? I had, my younger brother, Draper, who I'm very close to, my older brother, Jeffrey Kilpatrick, I didn't meet until I was 17 years old, and my older sister, LaShonda Franklin. Those were the people that were closest to me. Those were the people that meant the most to me. I was real close to Shonda, so she would talk to me all night long about what I was going through at home, And so finally I left home at a very young age, and began dating men that were in their mid-20s and early 30s while I was still a teenager. And I learned how to use my body to get what I want. So that's what molestation and rape do for you. I realized, hey, okay, if this is what men want, maybe I can use this as a tool. And so I began to do just that. I know this is what men want, so I'm going to use it to my advantage. And at a very early age, 17, 18, I realized that, hey, I was mad, and I was mad at men. And by this time, I had been raped several times. So I started to, as I would say, dog men out, treat them bad, because I felt like that's what they did to me. I just categorize every guy based on what, a few guys did. So I was, I became this monster, and we were poor. We didn't have much. I used to envy the things that people had, so I had to start dancing at 13 to buy my own things, buy my own clothes, buy my own shoes, and started dating men. At that time, I was dating drug dealers. By the time I was 12 and 13 years old, I'm dating drug dealers that could provide and care for me, because of course I had no mother in the picture, so I did what I had to do to survive. And all I knew was Greenville, Mississippi, but I knew in the back of my mind, I still had the things that Mr. Larry Byers told me. I had the things that Miss Wells told me from T.L. Weston. I had the things that a lot of teachers, Miss Smith from Greenville High. I had, a lot of the Miss McDavid from Ella Darling. I had all these things that I remember them telling me about how smart and how brilliant I was. And that stuck with me, like, okay, I have to do something with this brain that God has given me. And then, of course, I got married really young. That was toxic. I was still in trouble with the law. My temper was way off. It only took very little to upset me, and I was doing something violent. I was a very violent person. I was a very mean person. I didn't care about people. And I did a lot of things that I regret to this day. I was in and out of jail. I can't count the times I've been in jail. I was facing 99 years in prison for an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon because of all the stuff that I had dealt with over the years in my childhood, and I never really healed properly. So despite all that, in the midst, I had my children, and I knew that I wanted something different for my children. So I knew I had to do something. Like, I had to change my thought process. I had to change who I was. And people didn't like me. Like, they knew I was violent, so they didn't want to be around me. They didn't want to associate with me. So I literally had to deal with me. I had to leave the state of Mississippi and move away to another state. And even then, I was still dealing with anger. I was still dealing with the hurt and the pain of my childhood. I was still, wondering why I never had a relationship with my mother. And to this day, I still have no relationship with her. And I tried really hard to build this relationship, establish this relationship with her, and it wasn't there. So I had to build myself up to who I wanted to be. I had to change the way I thought. I had to change my whole life in its entirety. And because I had done so many things, I, caught a felony in the state of Texas. And at that point, I realized I really had to change who I was. Like, I had to turn my life around, not just for myself, but for my children. I began to really pray. I began to really seek God about who I was. And I didn't want to be the person that I used to be, so I had to change who I was. This episode is brought to you by Savan Tax. Are you looking for trustworthy, hardworking, reliable tax accountants and CPAs to complete your returns with no worries? Savan Tax is the place to go. You can reach them at www.savantax.com in the Atlanta metro area, and they have several locations throughout the U.S. to assist you with all of your tax needs. And when I started to change who I was, and I decided to build myself up, build a new me for myself, for my children, and my family, the family members that I was closest to, and who's always been there for me. And so that's what I did. I divorced my first husband. That was toxic. I almost killed him. But God spared me even in that. And when I began to change who I was, I began to reinvent myself. Started my own business, expanded on my business. And then I started another business, and then I started another business. And I began to change who I was, not just on the outside, but on the inside, like who I really was. I began to heal from the hurt, the pain of being sexually abused and raped. I was even gang raped when I was 12 years old, and I had no support from my mother in dealing with that because, of course, she allowed her husband to do the same thing, so there couldn't have been any support. But I began to heal, and when I began to heal, I began to change who I was on the inside. And yes, I've forgiven her, and I love her, but I've chosen not to have a relationship with her because of where I am today. And upon starting all of these business, I was successful. I learned a lot from a lot of people, people from every background, poured into my life. And I just thank God, because once I changed who I was, people were drawn to the new me, the new T Brandy J, and not that old, bitter, hateful, resentful, hurting, angry person that I used to be. And when I became who I am today, a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people were amazed at how I turned my life around. A lot of police officers who I knew, were amazed that I actually was able to turn my life around, build several businesses and become successful, and then help my children start businesses, help my friends start businesses, and partner with my friends and things. So at this point in my life, I'm still growing, and I've healed, and I'm still moving higher in things that I'm doing. But at times, we have to reflect on the past. So my reflection on my past is to let the people know, let you know who T Brandy J is. And there's a lot of things, that I'm leaving out, but you'll get to learn a little bit more about T Brandy J and my family and my businesses, my circle, my associates, my partners. You'll get to know more about them throughout the episodes and throughout the Money Magnet podcast. So I'd like everybody to stay tuned. Write down your questions, email me your questions, comment me your questions, and also subscribe to the Money Magnet JB YouTube channel. The link will be below, so definitely click on the link and subscribe. You don't want to miss any of these episodes. The episodes will be also posted on podcast platforms as well, but you don't want to miss out, so definitely subscribe. See you guys soon.